are at 1 Samuel 8. Let's call this one Uncertainty. And again, subtitle it If, pointing, as we said in the last chapter, to this dilemma of finding your freedom. To the degree God delivers us from external enemies, it carries with it us having to now confront, to the degree we have problems that resurface, the degree to which those problems are caused by the person staring us in the mirror. And that is exactly what Israel is dealing with now, as we saw in the previous chapter. During the reign of Samuel, the Philistines were subdued. And so we do not see them having an external enemy at the time the conflict in this chapter arises. And that conflict comes because Samuel's sons honestly aren't doing as good a job as he did in serving as a priest and a judge in Israel. They are judges, but they go after ill-gotten gain, which is not unprecedented. Eli's sons screwed up and God removed them from the priesthood. Likewise, it would be reasonable to think that if Israel sent up a proper plea to God, he would do the same thing to Samuel's sons as judges. But they use the failure of Samuel's sons as an excuse, as they're literally going to say, to be like the nations around them. And so, once again, we talked about that old term, keeping up with the Joneses, can plague us as a first world problem, meaning once we have enough peace, that we're not having to put out fires and fight battles. We sometimes have to face the internal demons of looking around in our idle time and wondering how much better we could have it if our lawn looked like that one. So that's what Israel's doing. Even though if they would have recalled what God said about who they should have been at their best, they would have been above the nations, the people that the nations were looking up to, but in their fallen condition, before they can fully get back to the place God was leading them back to, they begin to look out the window and just want to be like everybody else. And so they make that plea to Samuel, using the failures in his family as an excuse for getting what they want. So God is going to tell Samuel, after Samuel prays to God, that, look, this isn't really about you. This is the same thing that they've done ever since I led them out of Egypt. And in a lot of ways, like Moses, you are simply the person who they can lash out at. And so understanding that, Samuel is going to go ahead and, as God is going to tell him, warn them about what their king is actually going to be like. Because not only are they settling for being like the people around them, they're going to settle for essentially going back into slavery. Understanding that he's delivered them from Egyptian slavery, their king is basically going to put them back into a form of bondage in their own nation. And so this irony remains in Israel. In indulging their freedom, they are going to consciously take a path that leads them to crave, to live at a level that's beneath their potential. And so, even worse, because they've never taken the time to deal with the character defects that are leading them back into misery, this time they're not just going to lead themselves back into misery. Having found freedom from the Philistines, they're going to lead themselves right back into slavery. It's just going to be the slavery of one of their own countrymen, which is why we often say, God's best to you as you go forward in him. God willing, allowing him to show us the degree to which our recurring problems aren't so much the result of an external enemy as much as they are the result of our inner me.